wanted to do something a little bit different for this week's deep dive. Those of you who have seen my dives know that normally what I will do is take some kind of relationship or family phenomenon, wrap it up into a little bit of psychology, hopefully teach a couple of lessons along the way so we're all better people for it. I want to break away from that just a little bit because this has actually been on my mind for a little while. I want to talk about the 5 things that I got right after a devastating divorce. But I really kind of want to get out of my place to do that. So let's go for a walk. Let's get some fresh air.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. I'm inspired by thirst, I'm inspired by worth. I desire your worst, so you can just hide while I work. I ain't tired, you first. I'll write a second, third verse about the lies you go disperse. You never did shit, I know it hurts. Something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't. That's what guides me the most. Fuck your lies, I'll do what I want. The gas in the back of the set, never leave. She's so bad, hit the gym, hit the black. The gas in the
There. This looks like a decent spot. Let's get some fresh air. So, I did want to make this this dive more personal for a lot of people, maybe a little bit less abstract. And I do want to give some information sometimes on this channel about struggling through divorce, because so many of us go through it with very few, if any, resources at all. So let me just dive into this first one. First thing that I did absolutely right after devastating divorce. And for a little context, I was in my early 30s, had 3 very young daughters. I think they were ages like 2, 4, and 7. Married for 11 years. Very active in our church. In fact, owned a Christian bookstore at the time. Very small northern Illinois town. None of our parents had gone to college. We were not expected to. So in that kind of a town and upbringing, you know, it's the classic finish high school, find a job that you can tolerate, and, you know, let everything play out there in those kind of small town abstract type ways, you know. And so after 11 years and 3 young daughters, she had become unhappy. I won't get into all of the details, at least not today. But it took her a while. I had some suspicions, and it finally came out that she had had multiple affairs, and in fact had later told me that she did that so that I would leave her. So again, you know, being in that small town, I did not have a solid career. I had an associate time. She had no education, no college education. She had been working at a bank as some kind of customer support teller type position for a few years. I had struggled with work. Later found out that it was because I was just so depressed being in that small town. It was very hard for me to find work that was meaningful to me. I mean, you could do things like one of the things I did is a supervisor at a telemarketing company. You could be a manager at a McDonald's or a Walmart, maybe sell some insurance, or work at the cell phone shop. Maybe start yourself a little muffler business, something like that. But not a lot of opportunities there in that small town, and not a lot of instruction or motivation from our family, you know, to do anything other than just that. So when it all came down, I was absolutely devastated. And for a little while, I did try to go to therapy, to counseling, and the woman was very good. She was very empathetic. I did like her style, but after a couple of months of separation, I think it was, I could not afford the sessions. You know, I was losing my ability to pay with insurance and everything, and because our meetings were happening less frequently with this counselor, with this therapist. And there was a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. She recommended that I start making some notes and writing a few things down between our sessions. And I will say that that's maybe the best advice that I have ever gotten. And her recommendation turned into this. Each of these 5 composition notebooks turned into my lifeblood for almost 2.5 years. For those 2.5 years, I journaled everything. I counted them up. I think at one point it was about 900 handwritten pages. And I seriously think that it changed my life, saved my life. Because what I would do is I would carry whichever one I was currently working on, or whichever, my most current notebook, I would carry it with me everywhere. I had gone back to school to work on my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's degree. I took it with me to every class. It was in my backpack at all times. When I would go to work, I would be writing on my lunch break, on the coffee breaks, in the middle of the shift. I would take it to coffee shops and just sit down for anywhere from 20 minutes to 2.5 hours and write as much as I could. And one of the things that I really like about it is that it became my therapy. It was free, it was immediate, and it was on demand. And like many guys, I don't think I'm really an exception in saying that, I especially after when the separation started, didn't really have a lot of friends. We were active in our church, but those relationships kind of failed very quickly, as some of you can imagine. I'll save that story for another day. But because I went to school, or returned to school, now going through the divorce, and losing what friends I had in that small town, not really making any new friends. They were much younger than I was in my classes and at the university. I had a lot of time alone, and I spent that time alone writing. Sometimes it was, several days in a row. Sometimes, I'd miss a day here and there. But honestly, just the freedom just to get everything out. I didn't need answers. I didn't need anyone to tell me, okay, well, this is what you're doing, and maybe work through this and everything else. I had the immediate reflection of writing down my very candid, very honest thoughts. And after a while, one of the unexpected benefits was I could flip through, after a year or two of writing, I could flip through and kind of see and read some of my literal words from previous months, like I said, 1.5 years prior, and do some reflection on that. And one of the greatest benefits of that, I think, was that it really gave me an indication of progress that I was making, that I couldn't see day to day, right? It's like seeing the forest through the trees. Going back to school, finishing this class, writing that paper, just making, strides and strides emotionally and in education, and just different experiences in life. I could go back and I could see my progression. I could see that gave me a lot of confidence to do that. And I would recommend, if any of you are going through a separation, a divorce, you don't know what's coming next, you're finding it difficult to talk to people that maybe you do see on a regular basis. I don't know, maybe it's a bowling team or whatever the case might be. Maybe you watch college football with your buddies, down at the pub, something like that. But if you're ever in a situation in which you feel like you just need to get stuff out, I highly, highly recommend pick yourself up some type of a notebook, carry it around with you, and just start writing. Find a park like this one. Find a coffee shop you could just put on some headphones and listen to some Def Leppard or Billy Joel. Whoever it might be. But yeah, that sense of progress that I would get when I would go back and read through my past entries was phenomenal. And don't let anybody tell you that that it's not masculine to journal or to write your thoughts out. In fact, I think the exact opposite. Sitting with it, not knowing what to do, not having that reflection. Because listen, man, you're going to have so many emotions going through, and you're so many decisions to make, and just having it down in your own handwriting, in print, you can go back and say, oh yeah, that's right, I totally forgot that I was struggling with this at one point, and this is the lesson that I learned from it. Because you're going to go through all of this stuff, if you're anything like me, and because things change so quickly, you're going to lose track of what you've actually done, what you were thinking. Life just moves so fast with or without you. So that's one of the biggest things. I think the main biggest thing that I did right after a devastating divorce. So I would recommend it for anyone. Like I said, just in fact, we'll get to this later on in this deep dive. But all of this 900 handwritten pages over almost 2.5 years, is this. It became this. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Like I said, I think maybe in part 5 of this deep dive. But I hope this resonates with some of you. With the custody and divorce and everything, there's just so much. It's so broad. I wish I could cover it all in one video or a 5-part dive. The videos that are all 8 to 14 minutes long. Which is typically what I do. But if I could just at least get some guys thinking, having conversations, because honestly, I don't think that there can be too many conversations or videos about guys talking about their experience with divorce and custody. I don't think that we could have too many of those sources online. I think that more guys need to be doing it so that we can hear each other's stories, so that we could grow together, we can teach each other. Guys know what to expect when they're blindsided by divorce or infidelity. So I hope that this change in dive topics resonates with some of you. Please do let me know in the comments. I'm very, very curious to see if topics like this are impactful, meaningful for guys, because I do want to do some more along this topic. It's a passion of mine, and so yeah, let me know what you think. If you are going through something, stay strong, and I'll be back real soon.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit.
So in part 1 of this deep dive into the 5 things that I did absolutely right after a devastating divorce, I spoke about how writing, how journaling likely saved my life, and probably is the best advice that I'd ever been given at such a difficult time. The second thing I want to talk about is planning a future for myself before I even believed in it or believed in myself at all. It started with just like simple routines, right? It was, even just going to bed at a consistent time each night. There was a time for a couple of months, just getting myself to the YMCA for a workout for half an hour or an hour, just a few times a week for a couple of months, just starting to rebuild those steady routine patterns in my life were really, really helpful. They actually kind of like became structure when my identity was gone, or was certainly about to make some serious transformations. Again, whether it was workouts, going to the coffee shop to write, making time for that, just grabbing a coffee and sitting by myself, just making that dedicated time. And I didn't learn about this term until much, much later, but I realized after a while what I was doing was actually giving myself Ulysses contracts. And what those are is basically they're self-imposed commitments that you say you're going to do now so that you have far less wiggle room to get out of those commitments later. So I would tell people I'm going back to school. I would tell people I'm going to do this. I would sign up. This would be after a while, but things like signing up for classes that I didn't know if I could afford them, is making those type of commitments for myself, which was very, very out of character for myself. I just was not raised in any type of a home in which I was taught, how to lead myself in life, really. So I was making a lot of decisions, not even knowing what the outcomes might be. Just, again, planning something before I even believed in myself. So, again, we'll talk about this in an upcoming part, but part of that was returning to school, for undergraduate and graduate school as well. And so there were a lot of changes, and part of this, believing or making plans before I even believe in myself was, moving from that small town into Chicago, where which is where I did my graduate studies at DePaul University. Didn't know anyone. I mean, I remember the first time I rode on a train on the L. I was in my 30s. I was 33, 34 years old, divorced with those three daughters. I was getting roommates that I didn't know. Hell, I think a couple of them I met from Craigslist. Just said they had an extra room. They were looking for a roommate. I learned a lot of hard lessons making these plans. I remember just within my first couple of months in Chicago, I was so afraid to ride the bus or the train because I didn't know the schedules. I didn't know how to get on them. I didn't know where to pay for it or what stop I should get off. And so for the first few months, I just rode my bike, where I could. And after only about 2 or 3 weeks, that bike was stolen downtown in River North. And, I was 5 miles away from home. I didn't know where. I mean, I could figure it out. I forget even how I actually got home. I may have walked. I may have walked that 5 miles home because, again, I was so afraid of the trains and the buses and everything else. And there was a time where I actually worked three jobs. This was those couple of years between undergrad and grad school, again, not knowing if I could handle that kind of load. And, you know, getting into grad school, I was paying thousands of dollars for those applications and the courses to help me do better on the standardized tests, the GRE, right? And so hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of dollars on those, and the application fees themselves. Just making all kinds of commitments that I didn't know how anything was going to work out, but again, all of this was just year after year, just planning, making one plan, one commitment to myself after another. Again, not knowing how it was all going to work out. Um, Man, some of it was just so challenging. And again, there was no one there to cheer me on. I'll talk about relationships. I think maybe in the next part or another part of this deep dive coming up. You know, and I wrote about it so many times. Like I mentioned in these journal pages, so many times I don't know what to do. I don't know if this is going to work out. Um, and I got a lot of hate for it, especially from my kid's mother, some others as well, some former friends were not happy with decisions I was making, whether it was simply returning to school at all or foregoing what they thought I should be doing, like as far as getting a better job or a higher paying job. And what are you doing in school when you have these financial obligations and commitments? I got a lot of hate for a lot of years. I was working jobs that paid terribly. I was waiting tables. Most of the time, it was just barely enough to pay my rent, my share of the rent, and utilities, and the public transportation to and from work and all around town. Did some tutoring at one point. But I got to tell you, I would absolutely do the same thing all over again, making decisions that I wasn't sure what the outcomes would be, and big decisions too. But again, it all started with simple patterns, whether it was sleep schedules, going to the gym once in a while, just making sure I was eating, at consistent times or at all. Sometimes, I had to retrain my nervous system after a lot of chaos, over especially those first 2 years. So what I started to do was I noticed, and this is why I talk about locus of control a lot. What I noticed, I didn't actually know that there was a term for it at the time, but I realized after a while what I was doing is I was replacing that external locus of control, right? From my kid's mother, my ex, other people's expectations. Why are people doing this to me? Why can't they leave me alone? Why can't this and everything else? And I wish I could do this. And I started to replace all of that with my decisions, with an internal control. And a lot of that started by owning my time, owning my decision and my future. And I think it was, it's like it's those moments when routine stops being survival, and for me, it started to be my identity. People did start to understand. It took them several years, but they started to understand that I was living life on my terms, whether they liked it or not. So for me, the predictability, especially early on in those first couple of months about learning about her infidelity and not knowing where I was going to live or what my future might be. When would I be able to see my kids? How is all of the custody stuff going to play out? All of those things. So I needed that predictability. I needed to reclaim a lot of that to rebuild my trust in myself even. And I firmly believe that people don't just find themselves. They need to schedule it. They need to schedule everything back into existence for their own sanity. So that's a lot. I think of what really got me past, pardon me, some hard times is planning a future before I even believed in it or believed in myself. Because I got to tell you, man, that shit put me through the ringer. It seemed like nobody believed in me. Nobody liked me. Everything quite literally was being taken away from me. Um, but yeah, making those commitments before I believed in myself was a big thing. And if I could make recommendations at all, would be find something that you love to do. Dive into it. It took me a while to realize what I had actually been doing, but planning for a future, whether I believed in myself or the plan or not. And if you're comfortable with that, hell, even if you're not, it doesn't have to be moving across the country. Oh, in fact, let me, state that after grad school, I didn't know where I was going to get a job. I had applied places in Virginia, Wisconsin, Iowa, on the West Coast. Interviewed at several of those places, and my first job out of grad school after getting my doctorate degree, actually took the first job that was offered to me, and that was in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I had never stepped foot in Louisiana until about 20 hours before I started that job. I did all of the interviews remotely and used my credit card to pay for that flight down there, and had no money, none at all. So I flew down there, landed on a Sunday, started that job on a Monday, having never stepped foot inside that state. And in fact, for the first 5 or 6 weeks there, stayed at a men's shelter. I made that commitment for that job. I didn't even know where I was going to stay, where I was going to live, but things worked out. Again, just making those contracts with myself, planning for my own future. So yeah, if you, maybe for you, it might not be moving across the country. Maybe it's something like finally, I like to say things like finally going and getting your pilot's license. Starting some kind of a shop. Hell, start a channel like this. Something to occupy your time, give you new skills. Make commitments to yourself that you don't know if you can achieve or not. There's only one way to find out. I was never ever going to have myself in the position where everything can be taken away. Not ever again. It took me 8 years to finally do it. I had to prove that to myself, and I had to prove it to others. I think a lot of it was channeling that loss into pursuit. If the law and their mother would not allow me more time with them or to live with them, then goddamn it, I'm going to use my time as I see fit for myself. Sinking all of my time into something to keep me busy, to prove everybody wrong, to build my self-confidence. Okay, so let's talk about the third thing I did right after a devastating divorce, and I apologize for the poor quality of part 2. Filmed part 1 in the park, went for that little walk, and as I was starting part 2, there was a flock of soccer moms and their collective 20 kids starting to pull in for some little Rugrats birthday party. So I moved from there over here into the courtyard, and you probably saw a couple of the the grounds guys. They had leaf blowers and hedge trimmers going all over. Thank God my mic didn't pick it up. But anyway, that's why I was talking more loudly than I should, everything else. So anyway, thank you for bearing with me. I try to produce better quality content than that. But let's move on to part 3 of things I did right after a devastating divorce. And this one is actually something I can't believe that I survived, or that I actually accomplished. And part of it was because of those Ulysses contracts that I made with myself, and that I spoke about in part 2. And that was going back to school. So again, I mentioned that at the time of my divorce, I was in my early 30s, 33-ish. Had those 3 young daughters, 2, 4, and 7. I had an associate's degree from community college, a town over. Again, living in that small town. And I thought, well, hell, what am I going to do? I knew I wasn't going to have my kids with me full time. I mean, I wasn't stupid enough to think that would happen. Didn't have anywhere to stay, right? Went in, stayed with my mom and my stepdad for a while. Just until I could get kind of acclimated. And I actually spent about 4 or 5 months living in a dorm, in a like an 8x12 one little bedroom dorm on campus for my first semester back. But going back to school did a few things for me. Number one, it kept me busy as hell. I still did have obviously a lot of time to think. I mean, as I mentioned, I was just devastated, and I was doing a lot of journaling, a lot of writing, like I mentioned in part 1. But what it did was it kept me from sitting around doing nothing, from watching TV or playing video games, or just making myself useless. It gave me something to do, and it was so challenging. I mean, here I am in my early 30s, living in a little dorm room on campus with all of the other 19, 20-year-olds, and wow. Going from owning a home and having a yard, a garage, driveway, and having none of that. But going back to school, not only did it keep me occupied, it got me out of that small town. The university that I went to was probably about maybe a 45-minute drive from that little town. It was in the Chicago suburbs. So that was kind of like my initial kind of first move out of that little town. So that started to build my confidence a little bit, right? I didn't feel like I was just suffocating, in a cage. So it, even just like geographically or location just started to kind of like broaden my horizons a little bit. So it kept me really, really busy, and it gave me those long-term goals. I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to go find some job in a little shitty 1-bedroom or studio apartment and sell insurance, like I mentioned, or find some job that just wouldn't not have been meaningful for me. It gave me a lot of hope. Again, didn't always believe that it was going to happen, but. And one thing I decided early on was that I was never, ever going to have myself in the position where everything can be taken away. Not ever again. Nobody would ever be able to take everything from me. And I had the foresight to understand that that's one of the things that getting my college degree would do for me. Nobody can ever take that away. Or I wouldn't recommend that everybody go to college. I have my issues with college, higher education, at least here in the United States. I've spoken about that before. I'm sure I will more in the future. But for me, it worked out very, very well. And I knew if I was going back to get my bachelor's degree, I was not going to stop until I had a graduate degree, which ultimately happened. It took about, from 2006 to 14, it took me 8 years to finally do it. But again, that's those kinds of contracts I was making with myself. I don't know if it's going to work out. Shit, I'm making plans and spending thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours investing into that long-term 8-year goal. But it worked out for me. Again, because I wanted to put myself in a position where nobody could ever take all that shit away from me again. I would no longer be under anybody else's control. I had to prove that to myself, and I had to prove it to others. I'm sure that there are a lot of people thinking that, Todd couldn't hold his marriage together, right? His wife went around and was fucking half the town. what kind of guy is he? What kind of loser is he that she would do something like that? So I had a lot to prove to myself and to others. At one time, I was talking about finishing that undergraduate degree, keeping me busy. There was one semester I took 21 credit hours. I took 7 courses, and I was working. I was waiting tables. I think at that time it was was at TGI Fridays at that point. I did Buffalo Wild Wings, Rainforest Cafe, all that nonsense. But yeah, I took 21 credit hours. I had to get that signed off by my advisor, and I think either the program chair or the college dean. Can't remember what, but that's how busy I kept myself. And through that process, I ended up finishing with a 3.9 GPA there, and part of the process got into the Psychology Honor Society. Psych-Chi was inducted into that. And then even moving on into grad school, kept myself extremely busy there too. Went to conferences, to present my research all over a lot of the East Coast in the Midwest, Boston, New York, DC, down here in Florida. I think we went to a conference what was it? I think it was in Tallahassee, but Bloomington, Illinois, Chicago, and other places. I probably went to, I would say, 12 or 15 different conferences, regional and national, in the 5 or 6 years I was in grad school. So that kept me very, very busy. I was actually elected to APA Division 27. I think it's 27. Society for Community SCRA, Society for Community and Action Research. Community Research and Action, I think it is. I think it's APA, American Psychological Association Division 27, was elected as national student representative for there. So that gave me, opportunities to travel and to be in their meetings and work on some of their initiatives as well. So, I did a lot of shit. I kept myself so extremely busy, even through grad school. And, doing my own research, taking my classes, doing my dissertation, all of it kept me so extremely busy. Again, I'm saying years. But yeah, I would recommend, if you're looking for something to occupy your time, to reinvent yourself, really is what I did. It was a total overhaul, reinvention of myself. I would say even, something close to a rebirthing. I am nothing like I was 15, 20 years ago when I went through that divorce in my early 50s. Now, I can't believe the person that I've become. I'm so much happier right now. But for other people, it doesn't have to be an 8-year-long commitment to something. If you're in your 40s, in your 50s, and you're struggling at this point, you don't have maybe 8 years that you want to give to something. But if I could say anything about the reinvention of myself and the purpose that it gave me, it was entirely, again, worthwhile. I would absolutely do every bit of it over again. As difficult as it was, as challenging, as broke as I was, I can't even express, right here in this video how difficult it was. Just getting into grad school took me 2 years to do. I applied, I think, to 11 grad programs 1 year. Did not get into any of them. Chalked it up to experience. Worked on my research, published a paper, got another year of research under my belt. Was working for a research center there at DePaul University, and applied a second year, that time to only 3 universities, all of them in Chicago, and was finally accepted. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't been accepted that second go round. I don't know if I would have tried again. But yeah, I think a lot of it was channeling that loss into pursuit, right? And again, nobody's ever going to say this shit about me again. Nobody's ever going to be able to take everything away from me again. I was so goddamn driven, and that's really the only motivation I had. My parents, I did not grow up in a home where my parents went to college, did not expect me to go, didn't have any of that kind of direction in life. I had to figure out all of that stuff on my own. So I used a lot of that, that old I got to get out of this. I got to, let go of everything that I've been told and living in for the past 30 years and do something on my own. And again, for me it was school. For somebody else it might be something different. But I will say, if you can find a passion and you can dive into it, and it's semi-long term, if you need to go through some kind of a transition, a transformation of yourself, divorce is actually a great time to do that. You, unfortunately, like it was for me, if you're a dad, you're going to have far less time with your children. You might be all of a sudden have a whole bunch of free time on your hands. You have an opportunity to go out and do those types of things. Focus on yourself. And what was I going to say there? Don't feel like you're abandoning, or let me speak for myself. I did not feel like I was abandoning time with my children. I did see them consistently every couple of weeks and on holidays, even through grad school. They would come into my my apartment, and stay with me every other weekend in the city. We'd run around and do the tourist things and go to baseball games and museums and zoos. But when they were not with me, I looked at it as an opportunity. Listen, if the law and their mother would not allow me more time with them or to live with them, then goddamn it, I'm going to use my time as I see fit for myself. So again, that's turning some of that loss into progression and just a new identity for me, right? It was rewiring my self-worth. And just check a couple of notes. Got some highlights over here. I just want to make sure that I don't miss them. But yeah, I guess that's really kind of all that I want to say about that. But just the entire rebranding of myself, using that all of that shit that people were telling me, using it as motivation to prove them all wrong. It was deep. And again, an 8-year process, going back to school until the time I defended my dissertation. I would absolutely do it all again, because the rewards now have been even greater than I ever thought they might be. I would never be living down here in South Florida. I have a great job, plenty of time off, I get paid well. This would have never happened. I would never have everything that I have right now. I own a condo. If things had continued the way they were with my kid's mother, I'm not going to say I would wish it on anybody, but if it's going to happen, fuck, it was going to happen on my terms. So that's one thing, hopefully, that I can convey to you. And the third of 5 things that I did absolutely right after a devastating divorce was sinking all of my time into something to keep me busy, to prove everybody wrong, to build my self-confidence, and to reinvent myself. So I hope that resonates with some of you. Please do leave me a comment. I'm curious to know if you've taken such an approach, or any obstacles you could see that might be in your way. Again, it's not for everybody, but it worked extremely well for me. So again, as I like to say, if you're going through something right now, stay strong. I'll be back real soon with more. Thanks for being here. Number 4, I didn't get right away. And that's when I learned my lesson, that no more of that. I didn't trust myself. Being alone has done wonders for my self-esteem. That waiting part and focusing on myself made it a lot easier for me. Alright, so part 4 of 5 things that I did right after a devastating divorce. The first time I talked about journaling. The second one was giving myself Ulysses contracts, right? That was making commitments to myself and planning a future before I even believed in that plan or in myself. So making plans to do things even though I had no idea if I could accomplish them or not. And the third one was, for me, it was returning to school, but the overarching message with that one is finding something to keep me so very occupied for a number of years that I just did not have time to stop and wallow. And again, the journaling helped with that a lot. But I didn't have time to sit around and feel sorry for myself, just eating Cheetos and going to bars and things like that. So, but number 4 is one, I didn't get right away, but as soon as I realized its importance, I made a self-correction, and that was not dating until I believed in myself, or I just was simply ready for it emotionally. And so for this, about 6 months after our separation, I did meet a woman. We met online. I don't know if it was Match. I think it was probably Match.com. And so we dated only, God, for about, whoa, the wind's about to blow me over here. Hold on. There we go. We dated for only about 6 months or so. Not 6 months, 6 weeks or so. And again, this was about 6 months after we first separated, and right about the time the actual divorce papers were signed. I mean, it was right there. I kind of like got right back into it. And when that didn't work out, I didn't know how to handle it. I was already going through. So I had just moved into that dorm that I spoke about in the last video, and still didn't know where I was. I don't even know if I had a job at that time. I was paying everything on credit cards, and I had a shitty car. I was driving it on that little donut tire, right? Because I couldn't afford to put a new tire on my car, so I was driving around with that little spare tire on it. And that didn't work out, and my emotions, I just couldn't handle the emotions of oh my God, now here's another person that doesn't want to be with me. She was the one that ended it. She gave me the "let's be friends" speech, but no discredit to her. It simply was not going to work out anyway. But I didn't know how to handle it, and that's when I learned my lesson. That no more of that, no more. I'm going to focus on me. I got other things I need to be accomplishing. I don't need to be out here giving myself more reasons to not like myself, or to not be confident in myself. So I stopped that pretty early. I realized that I didn't need a rebound. I didn't trust myself. I think that's actually a lot of what it was. I did not trust myself with getting attached to somebody. Over like the first 4 years or so, I did do some dating. I would say a couple of girlfriends. None of them really, seemed like they would be anything that would last long term. One was about 10 years younger than me. I must have been 34ish or 35 at this point. I think she was 25, and I was living in the city. Met her. She was in some of my classes at the university. I moved from the suburbs into the city, and when I did that, she lived with her parents for the most part in the suburbs. And although she was 25 years old, her parents didn't want her coming into the city. And I started to think to myself, what the hell? I'm here divorced with 3 kids, working on all of these other things going on, and she's still under the control of her parents. They didn't want her driving into the city, so I had to break that off. She was pissed at me, but that one didn't hurt nearly as bad. None of my relationships, dating, girlfriends have ever hurt nearly as bad as those previous ones, or that previous one. But those were the kinds of things like I just didn't want to deal with. And for the most part, stayed single for quite a while. Even through right now. I moved down here to Florida with a woman that I was dating for 4 years at the time. She didn't like it. She had a hard time being down here. She ended up moving back to Chicago after 1 year. So even now, I'm not looking for a relationship. I've done a little bit of dating here. Hasn't worked out. But yeah, I think a lot of the being alone has done wonders for my self-esteem. The not needing or being dependent on someone else. And listen, man, call me selfish, call me whatever you want, but I can do anything anytime I want. I don't have to worry about making plans. I don't have to worry about, hey, let's do this, or this vacation, or that family, and these holidays and everything else. At this point in my life, I've been through it all. I really have, and I don't want to. I would rather be alone than go through the conflicts of all of those things. But one of the things that I really learned when I did kind of like get back out into dating and have girlfriends, here and there, was I realized that I was sticking up for myself. I was being more vocal about my needs, what I want. I was regaining my confidence through there. I didn't have any of that when I was going through my divorce. Actually, I did not add one of these. No, maybe another day. But when I was going through the separation in the divorce process, I had leaders from our church, the elders and groups and things like that, telling me what I need to be doing. This is how you fix it, Todd. Todd, what are you doing? You can't be doing that, Todd. Here's another way. Why should... It was everybody telling me what to do. So I didn't have, or I didn't feel as if I were able to make decisions and to say what I want through that separation process, or so when I did really get back into a solid emotional state in dating, I did have that confidence to say, you know what, I'm not sure this is going the way that I like it to go, or if we're going to be together, then this is kind of, these are my expectations. What do you feel about that? How do you see this happening? So gaining experience outside of that small town in conjunction with meeting and dating other women really did a lot for me. But I'm glad that I waited for quite some time. I think that waiting part and focusing on myself made it a lot easier for me to then enter relationships. Again, having that confidence. I was much more aware of what I wanted, and much more likely to kind of speak it up, or speak about it and to vocalize it. I don't have any stats on this. I haven't really done any research into it. So I don't have any numbers or percentages like that, but I imagine that there's a lot of guys who regret how fast they get back into the cycle. And for some of them, it works out. My brother went through a horrible divorce with 3 children, God, probably about 10 years after I did. And he got right back in, met somebody, and they're still together now 10 years later. So it worked out for him. He's found a way to make it work. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with his approach. It's not something that I would want. I look at his relationship now with that woman. They're still together. I would not want it, but it works for him. So for some guys, getting right back in, they find a way to make it work. So I'm not saying don't do that, but maybe I'll do this at some point, is take a closer look at how many guys do jump right back in to relationships, right back into another marriage. But I bet you there's a fair amount of guys that have a little bit of regret into doing that. Again, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do with your lives, or how to handle your post-divorce or your separation time, anything like that. I can just tell you that for me, being alone, not dating, was, again, one of the best things that I've ever done after a devastating divorce. I mean, it's that solitude that helped me identify triggers in myself, like, and to think about what it is that I really need. Exposed a lot of insecurities in myself. Can I really be alone? Can I? Hell, I remember one time when I think this actually was when I was in that dorm room. So it would have been just like very shortly after the divorce papers were signed, and I was living in that dorm room all by myself. And if I remember correctly, I think it was the spring or Easter break. And so all the kids not all, but most of the kids, they went home to wherever their parents are, right, for Easter. And so there were very few of us that were on campus. I didn't have anywhere to go. And I do remember that we had a big snowstorm over that several days as well. So there was like nobody around. And there was about a 4-day period where I might have seen 2 people, and I talked to nobody. I would just sit in the go to the library. I think the library must have been open, or maybe it was the game room in the dorm building, something like that. But I saw nobody, didn't talk to anybody for 4 days, and I was perfectly fine. It was a little eerie, it was a little weird, but it was moments like that I can look back on and say, you know what, I was fine. I didn't have anybody to call. Nobody was calling me. And just knowing, being comfortable in myself and not having to feel like I need to talk to somebody or have somebody to reinforce my ideas or whatever. It was those really kind of, I wouldn't say, I don't know, inconvenient is not the word, but I don't know. It was those times, but they really did test me in being alone. And, a lot of that helped me, I think, in the relationships as well. Knowing that I did not need validation. I did not need somebody to just talk to me, and I don't know. I don't even know how if I can explain it here off the top of my head, but a lot of it was relearning discomfort in my own company and sit in silence with myself. And it helped a lot that I did journal. I had those thoughts that I could all put down into writing. So I had myself to talk to, I suppose. But yeah, that's number 4 of 5 things I did absolutely right after a devastating divorce. Is I did not jump back into relationships. Or the one time that I did taught me a big lesson in that I needed to wait a few years before even really considering anything like that again. And I'm talking not even like casual, like trying to meet somebody. I'm not talking about jumping like a full-blown relationship. I'm talking about even trying to meet somebody. I avoided that. I'll talk more about that at some point, because I think that's maybe a topic. Let me know if that's a topic you would be interested in, is dating and relationships after a divorce or during separation. I'd be happy to do a little bit of research and looking into that. Because I do know how hard it is to not have somebody there on your side when you're going through so many challenging and difficult decisions and changes in your life. Believe me, I can imagine how helpful it would be to have that person of comfort there for you. Again, that's why I'm saying, I would never tell anybody what to do with their time or their emotions. I just happen to survive and thrive from it. But I understand. So if that's a topic you'd be interested in, let me know. Guys getting into relationships during separation, shortly after divorce, things like that. But anyway, as I like to say, as I conclude these parts of this deep dive, if you're going through something, stay strong. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about any of this. And stay strong. I'll be back soon.
We've been living in sin so long, all the feels are gone.
Helping men, that's why this channel exists. I think we need more resources out there for guys. Having this out there for the world to see, and kind of like a little fuck you to the world, that's one of my main goals, is to make my work useful for other guys. My own private suffering and making it public discourse. They want to hear your stories. If I can help some guys along the way to not go through what I did, that's why I'm here. All right, let's wrap up this deep dive into 5 things I did absolutely right after a devastating divorce. So if you're just joining us, first thing I did was journal. Wrote the hell out of myself. I like to say that I wrote myself out of misery or into a future. The second one was, speaking of future, was making commitments, long-term commitments to myself, Ulysses contracts, to make sure that I achieved as much as I could. The third one, what did we talk about? The third one was returning back to school. Again, that's not for everybody, but again, more long-term goals, something to occupy my time and build my confidence and make me a more valuable man, for myself, if not to others. And then just in previous one, part 4, I discussed dating and why it was so beneficial for me to not date and to not get into relationships for a few years, those first few years after my divorce. So number 5 that I want to talk here about, I mentioned it in part 1, was turning all of these journal pages, these 900 handwritten journal pages, into something meaningful, something helpful for other people. And this is something that actually, it took me a while to do. Now you got to understand, I started writing those journal entries 20 years ago. And it was not until I really started to make a commitment to myself this spring to get back into men's issues and helping men. That's why this channel exists. But as a part of that process, in fact, before I started this channel, I wanted to make sure that I put all of that in print. And that's how Confessions was born. All of those 900 pages are in here, plus more, in this 500-page, basically, it's verbatim. Every word that I wrote in those journal entries 18 to 20 years ago are in here. So everything I'm talking about, these 5 things that I've done right, it's all right here. And I wanted to make sure that I did that before I started this channel for a few different reasons. But the reason I wanted to get that book out is because I think we need more resources out there for guys. For me, for my personal, maybe even selfish parts, is I needed to feel like all of this turned out to something good. It gave me a sense of accomplishment. And maybe it's a little bit egocentric of me or narcissistic, I don't know. But just having this out there for the world to see, and kind of like a little fuck you to the world. Remember that guy that I was, that wife was whoring around and left him, all those kinds of things. That documents all of it. So at least for me, this is evidence of what actually happened, not the narrative that people were getting. So but really, I do want to make my contribution to men's efforts. If Confessions can help normalize guys' experience and give them a little bit of hope and say, holy Jesus, this dude went through this stuff. What are some ways in which I can, make different steps in my life? What are ways that maybe some things I hadn't seen before or recognized that maybe I can do, not exactly the same thing, obviously, but whether it's confidence or ideas or ways to approach post-divorce, that's one of my main goals, is to make my work useful for other guys. Kind of like turning wounds into work that actually matters, right? Even if people have to learn from my hardship to avoid their own, that's why I'm here. That's why even, outside of my divorce videos, I'll get to these in just a moment as well, why I like to share the content that I do. So listen, I would never tell guys to not get into a relationship, to avoid women. I'm not a woman hater. I would never tell guys to never get married. My approach is, if you're going to do those things, go into them with your eyes wide fucking open in what the cost-benefit analysis is. So I would never tell guys don't go into a relationship or never get married. My approach is, if you're going to do it, know what you're getting into and then make an informed decision. So again, as part of the as part of that, this is I've mentioned rules of engagement several times throughout my videos, and in fact have started a playlist for this book. The truth of the matter is, it's entirely written. It's about 80% edited. I need to do a couple rounds of, I need to finish the full the full developmental editing and then go back and do some proofing and stuff like but rules of engagement is my response to dating and relationships, mostly since the divorce. And what I should have done, what I would have done, what I would recommend other people. It's all psychological theory driven. A lot of my content comes from what's in that book. I've decided to hold off publishing it. I mean, listen, honestly, I self-published Confessions. It's got maybe a dozen sales on Amazon. I didn't do it for the money. I did it to make a resource available if people want it. And the same thing will be true of Rules of Engagement. It'll be self-published, and whether or not it ever makes any money, which is actually highly unlikely. I'm a realist. I understand that. But at least it's a resource for guys who want it, who seek it out. But my plan for that was to get it out this fall. I'm putting that on hold. Because there are some other things that I want to focus on, this channel being one of them. Because listen, I understand nobody wants to buy a book from a guy they've never heard of, and that's pretty much that's pretty much it. So I It may be another 6 months or so before that comes out. But again, just another way in which I'm taking my own experience, my own education, and my knowledge, and putting resources out there for other guys. 99% of this based on my own experience too. Like I said, things I wish I would have said in relationships, things I did say, and when I did say or do things, it pulled out the truth from women, right? When you look them in the eye and you say, listen, this is not cool with me. If you want me to do this, or if you want me to be that, that's not something I'm willing to compromise on. And when you look them in the eye and you say that, it's challenging, especially the first several times you do it. But that's kind of where all of this comes from. So it's a lot of lessons learned in that one. And my hope with both of them is to, again, encourage discourse. I mentioned, I think maybe it was in part 2 or 3 of this, I don't think we can have enough men's content out there. And hearing each other's stories and giving each other resources, learning from others' experience. In a way, that's a lot of what my work comes down to, is sharing my experience and my knowledge. Giving some evidence behind the words that I'm actually saying. It's not just me out here saying this was my experience and this is what I think you should do. I'm not here to give advice. I'm here to give options, to give information, and let my viewers do what they will with that information. So again, a lot of this is transforming my own private suffering and making it public discourse. So let me know what you think about all of that. Some guys are not as willing to be as public with their stories. I think we're making some big strides in that. There are a lot of channels out there. In fact, there's a few channels out there that I watch, or the once in a while come across my feed, in which they talk about their divorce. Just a guy walking down the street holding his camera with a little selfie stick, and the engagement on those is great. And I've seen several of them. It's kind of what prompted me to do this one too. I'm realizing that guys are hungry for this kind of information. What happens after divorce? What do I do? What should I expect? How did it happen for you? How did you overcome that? Oh, okay, well, yeah. See, and those are the kinds of conversations that I think we need more and more and more of. I would love to see more of those videos online, and fewer guys just sitting in their living rooms watching the Super Bowl or baseball, in hiding, retreating into themselves. I think we need more of this content. I encourage all of you. This space, I'm not concerned about this space on, whether it's online in videos like this, or people writing articles for, I don't know, some kind of online magazine or books, whatever the case might be. I am not worried about any of it becoming saturated or not having enough space. Not having enough space in the area for other people's content. I think that we've got plenty of room for it. There are guys out there that are starving for this kinds of information. They want to hear your stories. And if publishing, and listen, this shit is embarrassing. It really is. I did a lot of shit wrong. I think maybe, I can't remember if I said it in part 1, but I at some point I probably should do the 5 things I did absolutely wrong after a devastating divorce. My hope with this series is to give a little bit of positive and help guys move on in a learning experience. And in a lot of ways, that's what I hope that a lot of my content is. It's not bitching and moaning about women are taking this from us and they're all gold diggers and things like that. Yeah, I realize that a lot of that stuff very well may be true. I am not impressed with the way that a lot of women handle themselves and their perceived authority online. I think it's all trash and garbage, as are the women themselves. But I'm not going to make videos that do that. In fact, I think I'm going to make a video at some point about why I do not do and I will not do reaction videos. I just simply will not react to other people's videos and offer comment on them. I'll get into that another day. I went off on just a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, all of this. Get out. I was talking about guys maybe being, I don't know, embarrassed, shy, whatever. They just don't know how to get their story out, and confessions being embarrassing. There's stuff in there that I would not want to sit down, I don't think, and have a one-on-one conversation or talk to a group about, but it's in the book. It's raw, it's real, it's word for word in real time. But I put it out there because even though my ego says don't do it, people might think poorly of you. The truth is of the matter is it was all real, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I did. In fact, let me read this here from you. This is not a promotion for the book, but I really liked. It took me a while to come up with this line in the preface, where I wrote, "Fair warning: Confessions is a difficult read. For many, it will feel uncomfortable, even cringeworthy or humiliating, especially for those who have never lived it. Believe me, I know. I breathed every moment of shame, guilt, and consequence, whether my decisions were reckless or reasonable. But that discomfort is the point. The reality of fatherhood after divorce is that it's messy. It can't be edited. Time does not stand still to allow for perfection, and it's often brutal to witness, especially as it unfolds in real time. Yes, Confessions is raw and challenging, but if you think reading it is rough, imagine what it's like for those of us who survive it." That was the conclusion of the preface. So even though, a lot of that stuff in there is embarrassing, people would say, "Oh my God, what a douchebag! What a prick! I can't believe he made that mistake. I can't believe he did that or said that thing." Hey, it's all in there. And again, like I said, the reality is time does not stop for us to make correct decisions all the time. And I know I'm starting to ramble on here a little bit, but part number 5, the number 5 thing that I did absolutely right after divorce, after a devastating divorce, was tell my story. And again, that's why this channel exists as well. I know, and I clearly recall, I got 900 handwritten pages still, that I wrote 20 years ago as reminders of how tough it can be. And if I can help some guys along the way to not go through what I did, that's why I'm here. So let me know if you made it all the way all the way through this full deep dive. Let me know which one was most helpful for you. I'm curious because I do want to do, like I said, some more content if it's beneficial and impactful for guys about divorce, surviving it, custody. I can share more about my experiences in some of those details if it's helpful. But let me know which of the 5 resonated most with you. And if you jumped in here and you're watching only just this part 5 as its own separate part, go back and watch 1 through 4 and let me know which ones resonate. If you're watching the full dive, those of you who have been around know what I do is with my full deep dives, I release part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and then typically like part 5. There are about 5 parts now. I'll release them Friday through Sunday over the weekend, and then a few days later I'll smush them all together and send them out as one big video. Hopefully that's working out for people who like shorter and longer content, but it seems to be working so far. But yeah, let me know what you think about the 5 things that I did right. Did I miss anything? Those were the 5 that resonated most with me, and I would love to hear your stories. Send me an email. You can find ways to message me in the description. Anything I can do to help people get their stories out and to help more men through this devastating process, I'm here for you. Thanks for making it through the whole dive. I'll be back real soon.
Living in sin so long, all the feels are gone. Fella stopped me on the street last night, said everything's alright. Roller coaster, make it through the day, I'm right. It seems your meal ticket is gone.